Hello, boys and girls. Our trending word for today is genocide, which started trending on October 8th. And if you're not dumb as a sack of rocks, you know why it started trending that day. Israel and Palestine. But what a lot of people are wondering right now is this technically genocide, or is Israel just winning and kind of a dick? So in order to answer that, we are going to study genocides today. And fair warning, you think it's just the Holocaust and a few others, but genocides are very common. They're so common, we're just gonna stick to the last 100 years because it's so bad. It's like one every decade at least. It's bad.
In retrospect, that was kind of a weird intro.
There's a very real reason why when we hear the term genocide, we usually just go to the Holocaust. And that's because the term genocide was literally made for the Holocaust. Raphael Lemkin, who was a Jewish lawyer, coined this phrase in the mid-1940s to describe the Holocaust, but really all things under this genocide.
Genocide is a new word combining the Greek word genos meaning race or group, with the root of the Latin sidere meaning to kill. Dr. Lemkin, could you give us a little background on how you came to be interested in this genocide?
I became interested in genocide because it happened so many times. It happened to the Armenians, and after the Armenians, Hitler took action.
That's the definition. It's basically the killing of any group, and today we define it as a religious group or a national group or an ethnicity or a race, but this is genocide.
There's also cultural genocide, which is not necessarily killing the people, but killing their heritage, their history, their ethnicity type of thing, but that's beyond the scope of this video.
One of the most gruesome and famous genocides of modern history only happened 30 years ago, and it's called the Rwandan Genocide. And it can teach us a lot about genocide.
Avis à tous les individus qui nous écoutent. Le Rwanda appartient à ceux. Vous êtes ici les Hutus. Ils ont anisé.
That is what propaganda sounds like. That wasn't some obscure recording of some obscure thing. That was on the radio for all of Rwanda to hear during the genocide. As you can guess, this history is very complicated, but to oversimplify it, here's how it goes. There are two ethnic groups in Rwanda. There are more, but two major ones. Hutu and the Tutsi. The Hutu were the majority. They were around 85% of the population, while the Tutsi were only 15%. They were a minority, but there was always this kind of power struggle. There's a lot of complicated things about colonization and all that kind of stuff, but they're always kind of fighting. Eventually, as this Hutu majority solidified power, they started to make a lot of propaganda against the Tutsi minority about, well, let's start with the Hutu commandments. You can pause to read it, but I want to read two of the commandments because they perfectly show genocide propaganda and why it can be so scary and work so well. Commandment 4. Every Hutu should know that every Tutsi is dishonest in business. Their only aim is supremacy for their ethnic group. As a consequence, every Hutu is a traitor who does business with them. I like to call that the it's them or us argument, because you saw that here, you also saw that in the Holocaust, and you see it time and time in genocide. It's not only that your enemy is icky, but they are also racist against you. And so if you don't unite against them, they will get you first. So you have a duty to your people to go against them. The Nazis didn't just say Jews are bad. They said that Jews are bad, and if we allow them to exist here, they will ruin our country and our people. So we must go against them before they ruin us. Commandment 7. The Rwandan armed forces should be exclusively Hutu. The experience of the October War has taught us a lesson. No member of the military shall marry a Tutsi. This commandment is so important to know because it shows that often in genocide, the pretext is almost always war. The October War that commandment was talking about was a legitimate civil war in Rwanda, where Tutsis who were exiled, a lot of them were militants and came back and hid amongst the Tutsi population of civilians to hide and fight back, and they did take back territory from the Hutu government. But then, as you can see with these commandments, that was used as an excuse to say you cannot trust any Tutsi because at any point they could be harboring a militant. Let's call this argument the human shield argument. And on April 6, 1994, this is what played out. The Hutu president was flying on an airplane, that airplane was shot down, and the Hutu state declared war against the Tutsis. Quite literally overnight, a war began against Hutus and Tutsis, but oof. I can't even begin to describe like how fucked it gets. There was checkpoints the next day that showed up. And everyone had their ethnicity on their ID, okay? So you go up to this checkpoint with your ID, and if it said Hutu, you're good, potentially. But if you're Tutsi, you weren't put in prison. You weren't exiled out of the country. A machete was brought out, and you were probably beheaded on the spot. Did you have a wife? Cool, her too. You have a kid? Oh, you might as well get them too. It was, in a matter of literally only 3 months, nearly 1 million people got killed. There's so many fucked up elements of this, but the weirder thing about it is it wasn't Hutu militia only. It wasn't just like this well-regulated militia or military doing this killing. This was like people's neighbors. This was just general dudes killing your neighbors for being Tutsi because they got brainwashed. And the super fucking scary part is that this was not that long ago. There's interviews with people who committed the genocide and who lived through it. And if you look at the men, mostly, that committed this genocide, they're not psychopaths, which is the scary part. It wasn't just a whole bunch of like mentally ill people that have no morals. It was like people who were just ordinary dudes who just digested the wrong propaganda and they brainwashed themselves into thinking that that was okay to do. You can brainwash young men to do the most fucked up shit, all in the name of war. Ah, God, dude, it's... Sorry, rant over. But it's easy to look at Rwanda and what happened in the Holocaust and say, okay, we know what genocide looks like. It looks like this racist propaganda, there's this demographic or ethnicity hunting another one or the government, and yes, but no. Genocides can take form in a lot of ways, and a good example of that is what happened in the Cambodian genocide. If you ask who the victims were in this genocide, you don't get a clear answer because it's kind of everyone. For sure there was certain demographics that were targeted, but it was the Cambodian government killing their own people for really anything. If you were a teacher, if you were educated, if you were wearing glasses and you looked kind of smart, you were getting killed, regardless of what your ethnicity or identification was. Just like any other genocide, it didn't matter if you were a man or a woman or a child of any age. It was everyone, but it's still a genocide. At this point in my journey of research, I started to really think about why we consider certain things genocides and not others. It's not a numbers thing. You know, what happened to Cambodia, 2 million. What happened in Rwanda, 1 million. What happened in the Holocaust, 7 million.
That's my bad. After checking the numbers a little bit, it's actually 11 million for the Holocaust, around 6 million Jewish people, and then there was like Romani people and disabled people and political opponents and tons of other people.
But there are plenty of other genocides that everyone agrees are genocides that have way less than 1 million people. Like, for example, the Rohingya in Myanmar, they've died, what, are we at like 30,000? It's hard to know the exact numbers of these things, but much less than 1 million, but everyone agrees it's a genocide. So since it's not a numbers thing, I actually looked up the definition, and there's an official definition on the UN's website for genocide, and it doesn't help. Article 2 says, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. You can read on yourself, but you notice that the definition is really, really open, and it basically defines just war, general war. So the fact that Cambodia is like, yep, that's definitely genocide, but let's say like something like the Vietnam War, that's war. That's not a genocide, that's war. I'm not so sure anymore. It's funny because as an American, we always are taught about the Vietnam War and, you know, we shouldn't have been there, but we don't talk about what happened or really the numbers. 58,000 soldiers in America died during the war, which is very sad, but 3 million Vietnamese died and 2 million of them were civilians. And the more you read about it, it wasn't just Vietnam that was getting bombed and Agent Oranged and all these terrible things. We did it to Cambodia. We did it to Laos. We ruined villages, just bombed, flattened complete villages indiscriminately because we thought that they might have, let's call them terrorists or insurgents. Actually, a big reason why the Cambodian genocide happened was because America killed 150,000 people indiscriminately with bombs, and they were mostly civilians. How is that not a genocide? So bringing this full circle, it's pretty easy to see that, yeah, what's happening in Israel and Palestine is a pretty clear genocide, just textbook. The excuses Israel is using is the same excuses that they used in Rwanda, that they used in Myanmar, that they used, time and time again. They're human shields. Hamas is using them as human shields, so we must bomb them. Palestinians are hiding the enemy in their hospitals or in their schools or in their refugee camps, so we have to bomb those as well. The disproportionate numbers, I think we're, at well over
16,000
dead in Palestine, but how many people have died in Israel past October 7th?
Under 100.
And for those of you who might say, well, those numbers are super inflated and not accurate. Okay, that's a very, very scary thing to say, because that's exactly what people in Cambodia said when they were doing what they did, or in Rwanda, what they did, or in Armenia, or in Myanmar, or in the Native American genocide. Contesting the numbers of casualties is a telltale sign that someone is defending genocide. I've thought a lot about what my thesis for this video would be, and it's kind of killing is bad, but also don't ascribe too much value on the word genocide, because how we say something is a genocide is very much not always truthful. It's usually with a certain type of spin, because somehow America has 0 genocides under its belt. But if you know anything about American history, we've committed a lot of genocides. A lot.
Here's my conclusion. War is bad, and stop using my fucking tax money to kill people. Thank you very much.